Welcome to another episode of Passion for Property with me, Manni Chopra. And today I'm really excited because I've got someone with me today who is a friend, a confidant, a force to reckon with in the property industry with decades of experience in property, a very famous guru with over 80,000 subscribers. You got it, Ranjan Bhattacharya. Welcome, Ranjan.
Thank you for that warm welcome, Manny. Pleasure to be here.
Well, it doesn't feel like a podcast today because
It's
we
just a
are.
chat with
It's a
these
chat.
mics in the way.
Well, so we know you've been in property for over 3
Mm.
decades. So how did that whole, inspiration of a property start off? And tell us all about where it all began.
Property is so logical, really, isn't it? I
Yeah.
mean, you own an asset, and in the UK, we are blessed with the wonderful thing which is leverage. There are very few countries in the world where you can borrow so much loan to value. Like if you want to own another type of asset, whether it's gold or whatever it is, you have to have all the money to buy it.
Yeah.
With property, you don't. So you got that leverage and you can produce income from it. And it just seems so logical. I used to play Monopoly as a kid, and some people used to go around the board and think, oh, I'll get my 200 salary as you pass go. Do I want to buy this property? Do I want to buy? No, I want to keep my cash. But they don't win. The people that win are the ones that, okay, I've landed on this property, I'm buying it. And then you buy the next one. You build the empire because that gives you the income,
Yes.
which is much more than the salary going around go. Um, so it was logical. It was logical from the beginning. And as soon as I was old enough, which was pretty much 4 weeks after coming out of university, I bought my first place.
Wow. So what was your focus back then? And obviously, you've just come out of university, you probably had a job as well.
Mhm.
How did you then juggle everything? And what was your first strategy that you did?
Well, I think fundamentally I'm a lazy investor. I will take a look at the conditions at the time and get the maximum bang for my buck,
Yeah.
whether that's money or time and effort. So you go with the flow. And my first property in 1991, what we would call vanilla buy-to-let. It was very simple to just buy a two-bedroom flat, stick some furniture in, get a tenant in the next day, and bang. So I had a busy job. I was working for what is now Accenture, management consultancy, very demanding. I would typically complete on their property purchase on a Friday. Furniture would come in on a Saturday. I've already done viewings between exchange and completion, and someone's moving in on the Sunday, and I'm back at work on Monday.
Wow.
And it was not very complicated because that was the nature of the market. And I think every 5, 6 years, things change. Either some rules, regulations changed, the market demands change, supply and demand changes, tax changes, regulatory changes, all sorts. So you have to kind of then rethink.
Reinvent yourself.
And then with the lazy mindset, you think, well, based with the current landscape, how can I get my maximum bang for buck?
Brilliant. So what were you just getting, like 75% loan to value, get a mortgage, that's it?
Well, in those days, it was slightly before the buy-to-let mortgage came in. And if you had a good job, if you had a good career, you could get mortgages based on that. So I was, I was pretty much getting 100% loans
Oh, wow.
back then, um, because it was very, very dependent on what job you had, what career you had. It was only, I think I left full-time employment pretty much a year after you could get a buy-to-let mortgage without having a job.
Right. Because obviously you waited for that to happen.
Um, well, I think the property just got in the way of the job, and I couldn't do it any longer.
Yeah.
I think I wasn't. A lot of people come at this where they call it a job, they hate it, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I loved it. I had a passion for it as well, and you know what it did? It allowed me to do that job better because it's a very political type of environment.
Yeah.
And if you are working and your only source of income is that salary check at the end of the month,
Yeah.
everything you do is governed by getting that salary check at the end of the month. But I didn't care.
Yeah.
I had alternative sources of income through property. So that allowed me to be more carefree and better at the job I was doing, and it allowed me to enjoy it more.
Right.
So I probably stayed, from a business perspective, I probably stayed in the job too long.
Yeah. Because you had the
I just
money,
enjoyed
but
it.
you just enjoyed it. It wasn't one of those where people are done to get out of their job and
Yeah,
sack their boss and all of
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So would you say the first sort of 5 to 10 years doing much of the same? Buy-to-lets, blocks, flats in apartments and stuff like that?
It was, yeah, buy-to-lets, started off buying flats and then started buying houses because before, I think it was 1995, um, I was buying these 3, 4 story houses in London, and we'd split them up into 8, 9, 10 rooms
Right.
and basically rent them out as HMO. And there was no licensing because licensing of above 3 floors came in about 1995 or so. So those, it was Wild West, quite frankly. You
Amazing.
could do a lot.
Yeah.
You could do a lot.
Absolutely. Okay, well, that was the 90s, presumably, all of it.
But the
I know
cash flow back then, up until pretty much early 2000s, the cash flow on HMOs was, it was well into the double digits. If you weren't, it was worth doing because it was 18% plus.
wow. And this is all London, zones.
Yeah, that was London.
Zones
I
2 and
started.
3, something
Yeah,
like that?
yeah.
Oh, wow. Brilliant. I mean, it sounds like you came at a great portfolio at this point. So when was this first turning point then? Because obviously we are where we are. But back then, when did you change your strategy? How did the world of commercial start? Because that's really where I want to get myself.
Yeah, commercial was interesting because it was at that time I liked North London, and in the early 2000s, people were struggling to get the same yields because the yields started to go down, and people's solution was let's go up north, and people would go all sorts of northern places I've never even heard of, and just didn't really work for me. I didn't get those areas. Quite frankly, I couldn't really understand how you could do anything with a property that was worth 30 grand or whatever.
Cash flow, I guess, right?
Well, they just seemed worthless to me.
Yeah.
So I
In
thought,
comparison, of course, it was worthless, right?
but my logic was okay, and I think it's very easy to go and chase yields because you read the Sunday paper and they'll have a map saying this is where you get the best yields. So then what? You pack up and go to Hartlepool just because the survey says do there. It's much more creative to say, well, how can I preserve my yields
Yeah.
or grow my yields and stay put? Because if you build your portfolio in one area, you get far more economies of scale from having them all together. Management, everything becomes easier. So
And obviously, no capital appreciation whatsoever up north, right? So that was another thing.
that's
which I think-
another thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Capital appreciation is a big thing. Capital
Back in
appreciation
those days,
really,
you had those every 7, 10 years, property would
Yes.
double.
Yes.
You know, it followed that curve.
Yes, absolutely. And what you kind of find is that if you think about it, if you take a flat above a shop, that is worth less than the same flat in the neighbouring side
In a
street.
block, yes, absolutely.
So, but that flat above the shop rents for the same money,
Money.
as the one round the corner.
Or near or thereabouts, right?
No, it is the same money.
You think
'Cause-
exactly the same?
Yeah, well, sometimes more. Because because that flat above the shop for a tenant market is right next to all the amenities.
Yeah.
Whereas the one in a more residential street is a
You need
bit of a walk.
And you need a car,
Um,
possibly,
we need
if
a
you're
walk
away.
or a longer walk or car. Yes.
Yeah.
So so then if the flat is worth the same amount, less than the neighbouring side street, and the rent is the same, then obviously the yield
Yield
is
is
gonna be more.
higher. Yeah.
So you preserve your yields. So what I was finding, um, and then I got into shops, mainly because if you are buying a building that's 3 floors,
Yeah.
and only the ground floor is the shop,
Yeah.
the only bit you don't know is about the ground floor.
Yes.
Your knowledge knows about 2/3 of the building.
Yes.
And what I found was that when you look at the blended yield
Yeah.
from the commercial and the resi uppers for the whole building,
Yeah.
I was getting pretty much what my HMOs were getting before.
18%. Round about.
Yes,
between,
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So your initial commercial strategy was buying vacant retail with possibly the whole of thing was a vacant commercial or vacant retail with resi above.
Yes, I mean the vacant. The thing with commercial is magical. It's because if you buy a vacant house, it's worth the same as a occupied house.
Yeah,
It makes no difference. Um, but if you buy a vacant commercial property, it's worth less than a tenanted
absolutely.
because the valuation is based on who the tenant is, how much they're paying, whether there's a break clause, the amount of lease there
Lease.
is remaining, all of that. And that so you can have two identical commercial properties next to each other, one empty and one occupied, but the properties are physically the same,
Yeah,
but the empty one is worth less.
right.
You won't get that with residential properties like that in the same
And
way.
another interesting question I had in my head about commercial property was this yield thing that you talk about. So let's say two commercial properties right next to each other,
Mm.
both vacant. You find good tenants for both of them, but one of them is maybe a Greg's or something like a Gold Star tenant, whatever, and one is an independent mom and pop. When they come to value it, do you think both those will be valued exactly the same?
Um, Now, I think there has been a little bit of a change since COVID. Um, COVID really changed things up a little bit because what people found was that, see, the problem, I'm not going to mention any names,
Yeah,
but a lot of these big companies,
yeah,
um, if you've got 1,000 stores, you've got an in-house law team, you've got, and they're running rings around you. They are like,
they've got the clout, right?
yeah,
Basically,
there were a large. There's a large pharmaceutical chain in the UK which was open all the way through COVID, didn't have and was more busy,
than ever.
arguably, but they went back to all their landlords because of COVID, utilizing fine print in laws and stuff, getting haircuts on their rent, whereas the mom and pops didn't. Um, and there's so many examples like that. I spoke to a friend of mine who had a pizza franchise
Covenant.
chain
Yeah.
in one of his properties, and they moved out just after COVID, and he was looking to relet it. And he told me he gave instructions to his agents. I don't want any big chains. I want someone who's got one or two restaurants, but nothing big
Nothing. Yeah.
because they've got their legal teams and they tend to
And it's
sort
a
of
fine print to
abuse
get
things.
you
Yeah,
with, right?
yeah. But the thing with the larger tenants as well is that the lease is in the name of the company.
Yes.
So when we do commercial leases, we are letting to franchisees. So you can have a Costa, but it can be a franchisee. Um, but the on the contract, it's let to the company
Yeah.
and also the individual proprietor.
So you get the PG,
Yes, yeah.
personal guarantees.
Well, it's a guarantee. It is a guarantee.
Guarantee. Yeah.
And we also check that they're a homeowner. So my commercial tenants are safer than any of my residential tenants.
Yeah.
We had someone. We've got something going on where someone has basically absconded.
Yeah.
You know, he thinks he's got
One of your
himself-
commercial
Yeah,
tenants.
one of my commercial tenants. He thinks he's absconded. He thinks he's got away with it, but the lease is in the name of the new company he set up, but also him personally. And the lawyers have just checked out, the house, and because you can see
There's a value
when the
to
mortgage
yeah.
was last done, you could see there's a lot of equity in. So he's now going to pretty much pay
Pay
out
up. Yeah.
because he doesn't really have a choice. He's
He
on
just
the
locked
hook.
shop and just left, basically.
Yes,
Ah.
yes, but he doesn't really have a choice. So the with as long as you go for tenants, what I try to find, I don't like startup businesses, because startup businesses could go bust.
Yeah.
But it's the small chains that are nice.
Yeah. So you would rather go with a small chain yourself as well.
Definitely,
Yeah.
or franchisees.
And so let's say you've got a good small chain and they've done the fit out, they're starting business. Do you think when they get valued or your property gets valued, it'll value possibly higher than a chain?
The thing with commercial property, well, it depends.
Yeah.
It depends on what you're getting the valuation for. If you're getting it for a bank,
Yeah.
then when the bank instructs the valuation, they will give their terms of reference, and they all have slightly different criteria. Some of them may look at it and say, well, when's the first break clause? That's basically the end of the lease.
Yeah.
And or some of them will value it on vacant possession value regardless. Some of them will take the view that, okay, this is in a street which is highly lettable. There's no vacancies on the street, so it's easy to relet.
Yeah.
So it depends what the bank has instructed them to take into account on the valuation.
Yeah.
So the yield-based valuation can vary depending on the lender's criteria.
Right. And I think you raised a valid point about this length of lease. And I wasn't aware because when I rented one of my shops in Surbiton, going back about 4 or 5 years ago now, the break clause was at the end of year 2. So when we got it valued, it came in a lot less valuation than we were expecting, although it was like a 15-year lease, rent reviews at every 5 years. But because of the break clause, and now we realize that the break clause is considered the end of the lease, effectively.
By some lenders.
Yeah.
By some lenders. Others, but the thing is, you do have to provide it. That's the problem.
Yeah. But you can maybe negotiate better on the rents and say, well, look, we want a 5-year minimum break clause.
But some businesses, like some of these, with franchise businesses, a lot of people own clusters of them. So they'll own 15, 20. So if you have you've got 20 Domino Pizza stores,
Yeah.
you'll tend to find that you will be asking your landlord for a 15, 20 or 20-year lease. Because what happens is, if I'm a franchisee and I've got 15 Domino Pizza franchises and I'm looking to sell that as a business,
Yeah.
then the person buying it will be looking, well, do I want to buy it because this lease comes up in 2 years, this lease comes up. But if I've got more than
Older.
10 on all of
Yes.
them, then it's a better business to sell on.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, particularly established franchisees, like the idea of having longer leases, which of course is better for you as the landlord.
Brilliant. So let's say, I'm looking to buy a vacant commercial property. I'm looking for someone to occupy it. How do I go about finding a great commercial tenant?
I think it's first of all, you've got to start with the location.
Yeah.
So why are there vacancies in that location? If there's tons of them and they've been vacant for a long time, then it's probably a good idea to step away. But the other thing is where you just see, you see these prosperous areas, they're nice high streets and everything, but there's this one stubborn shop, it's been vacant for 2 years or whatever,
Yeah.
and you're wondering why, because other things are letting. It's always a good idea to find out why. I did on one of the properties I bought, there was this property that was vacant for 3 years.
Yeah.
And what had happened, you got to look into why. Why are others renting and that one's not? So this happens a lot. What happened was that unit was taken by a bakery on a 20-year lease. So they basically packed up after year 4, but they were on the hook for 20 years.
Right.
So it's up to the bakery to sublet it and find a tenant for it. So whatever rent has been agreed by the bakery, if they don't get the same rent from the subtenant, then they have to cover the difference.
And
But what happens is, as you get close to the end of the lease, so this with this bakery one, it was getting to the end of that 20-year lease.
Yeah.
So and if you come in and you remember this property, no one's done anything to it for 18 years.
Yeah.
The decor's a bit tatty.
Yeah.
If you were coming in and you want to set up a coffee shop,
Yeah.
and you take that shop and it's only got 3 years left on that lease, why would you take it on? Because you have no security of tenure after the main tenant's lease ends.
That's right.
So that's why they stay on the market forever.
Right.
So that's that then presents an interesting strategy, because once you know that,
Yeah.
so what we did with that one is we did a 3-way deal.
Okay.
So we went to the bakery.
Yeah.
Now the bakery, while that property is empty, they're paying for it.
Yeah.
They're paying rent on that,
Yeah.
and there's nothing they can do about it.
That was a question I was going to ask you. Is there nothing they can do
There's
about
nothing
it?
they can
They
do
can
about
give
it.
in the.
Well, they can, but they will be asked to pay a surrender premium.
Yeah.
So here's the three-way deal, and this is fantastic. You get you negotiate. How much will the bakery pay up front to be allowed to exit their lease?
Yeah.
Right. So the landlord gets that, and then you buy the property vacant without that lease in place. So what you do is you kind of factor that into your price. So instead of, let's say the landlord wants 800,000 per building,
Yeah.
he's getting his 800,000, but you're perhaps giving him 700,000 because 100,000 is coming from as a surrender premium
Yeah.
from the bakery,
Right.
and you tie it up on the day of completion.
So
For
they
all
surrender. So
those
on the
things.
completion, they
Yeah.
surrender their lease,
Yes.
which means that they will
They've
have to
paid a
pay
premium to the
100 grand,
landlord.
let's say hypothetically.
Yeah.
They wanted 800, but you're only having to pay 700.
Yeah.
And what was the third thing?
That's it, because it reduces the landlord, the owner gets their price.
Yeah.
You're putting in less.
Yes.
But also I get vacant possession on completion, which means I can offer that property out in the market as a fresh 10-year lease, and then I've got everyone in the high street wanting to go for it, because the only reason they weren't going for it because
It wasn't available
after the 3 years.
Yeah, and it wasn't on the market
Yeah.
as such either.
Well, it was on the market.
Oh, it was on the market.
But it wasn't letting.
Yeah.
Because why would you spend money kitting out a shop?
And if you've got 3, 4, 5 years
Yeah,
left,
you can be
right?
tossed out in 3 years.
Absolutely. Okay. That's
So
interesting.
that is an amazing strategy.
And you would find these leases where you'd go on something like Nimbus, or where would you find the fact that this property has a lease on it?
Well, I'm a bit old-fashioned. It's walking about and
Finding out.
just looking at a shop and that's empty. Why are all these others letting?
Yeah.
Speaking to the agent and then finding out the backstory.
Right.
So, why is it being let for 2 years?
Yeah.
And then you see...
Oh, yeah, because of course it's in the market, so
It's
it's
on the
fine. You can
market.
ask the questions.
And then you see the other classic, you look in the backyard and there are 5 other rotting agent boards from God knows how many years. So
Yeah.
no one's managed to let it. Why? What's the story?
Yeah.
And you've got to find that out. If you can find the story, which you'll never find on the internet,
Yeah.
that's the old-fashioned talking to people, chatting to neighbours,
Yeah. And getting the facts.
shops opposite, getting the facts, getting the backstory, and then figuring out whether you can kind of wrestle that property away from the mess it's in.
Right. So going back now to, you have this obviously switch from residential, or you've kind of tried to diversify, and now you're buying shops and uppers, and you're doing all this clever strategy. So that's one thing, vacant shops with uppers. So what are the different permutations and combinations of vacant shops and uppers? I know you talked about.
The other thing to mention with commercial is that a lot of shops are wrong-sized. So they were set up for a time when products went off shelves and didn't come home via Amazon. So the service sector business doesn't need the same space as shops with product. So here's the thing: if you have a big house and you want to split it into 2 flats, if you want to subdivide it into separate dwellings, you need full planning permission.
Yeah.
You can subdivide a commercial unit into multiple commercial units with no planning permission at all, just building regs. It's entirely up to you.
As long as you stick with the footprint, you don't extend the footprint.
Yeah. But you can't do that with residential.
Oh, yeah.
That's full planning. So if you've got a wide shop,
Yeah.
and it was previously a store that had products off shelves and all of that, you can suddenly put a dividing wall in between, make it into 2 shops, and you'll get more rent from it, and they'll be highly lettable.
Yeah.
Because it depends. Some shops are just too big to find a tenant.
Yes.
So that can be
And like you
absolutely
said,
fantastic.
another thing that all, especially newer businesses want, is they don't want to be under the threshold of the business rates.
Yes.
Which I think is around, what, 15,000 rent?
Something
or
like that.
50,000
Yes.
rateable value?
Yes.
Something
Yes.
like that.
But it's about I've really wanted to kind of do stuff that doesn't involve those folks at the local town hall, because I mean they're very busy at home. Notice I missed the word working. They're very busy at home. So I don't want to bother them by putting in excessive amount of applications for this, that, and the other. So whatever you can do which doesn't need
To
the
involve planning.
yeah, why not? Now, I mean, when I say that, I mean, if you're in a conservation area and you change the frontage of a shop,
Yeah.
then you do need planning for
But I think
the
it's still
frontage.
heritage statement only now, right?
Um,
Because since the new PD,
uh,
MA.
it depends on the area, but if it's not a conservation area, you're good to go with changing with basically splitting shops.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing about what I've done is I've also what I tend to do is I look at a space and I'll say, how can you make the best capital value and rental value from every square foot?
Yeah.
So if you've got a large shop, is the back of the shop better as a flat or as a shop?
Yeah.
Is the front of the shop better as a flat or is the space above? And you think of each part of the space and say, what's the best use for it?
Yeah.
And that's what you do. That's what guides you. So my first, which is one of my bread and butter strategies, which you've done as well, which is you take the back of a flat, a shop, and you make it into a flat. And the first one of those I did in 2005,
Right.
which was under full planning permission, pain in the ass. But it's a pain in the ass to get the planning, but as soon as you got it, you're good. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Because you take this worthless storage area at the back of the shop
Yeah.
and suddenly make it into a one-bed flat.
Yeah.
And then, so I was doing all of that, and then suddenly in 2013, they made it PD.
I know.
I couldn't believe it.
But the one thing the strategy you've just mentioned, think about the price per square foot. Commercial would be what, 160, 170, let's say, even in the prime areas. 550, 600 pounds per square foot on a high value residential area. You're tripling the value.
Yes. The other way, the commercial way of looking at it is you get maximum rent for the front of a shop, which is Zone A.
Zone A.
So you pretty much get Zone A rents for the entire space instead of just the
Which
front.
was just dead space, just gathering dust.
Which is it's absolutely sort of magic. And then I mean, we were talking about how I remember in 2013, sometimes government legislation is helpful, and sometimes government legislation is absolutely fantastic. And in 2013, there were two bits of government legislation that came out in the same time. There was one piece of legislation that came out that affected the gambling industry, and it affected payday loan shops.
Right.
So basically, payday loan shops had to shut down.
Yeah. Why? Because
they put in rules that made their business model unviable.
Right.
So we had a shop that was let to a payday loan.
So are those the shops where you go there with some jewelry and then they'll pay you some money?
Payday loans I don't exactly know, but I think it was when you basically got a loan.
Ahead of
high
payday.
Yeah. High interest rate. Yeah.
Show them your salary. You will be getting
Something
this money,
like that.
and
But
they
it
would
was-
charge you crazy amount of interest.
But they would actually they've gone bust. I can say it. There was a chain called Check Center with about a couple of hundred stores, and their strategy was to open up a Check Center branch by a job center.
So people coming in getting the checks.
Because those were the people that would use
Get
those.
the checks, yeah.
So we had a shop let to Check Center, and what they had done was they had the and you got to watch out for this, by the way, because we talked about big companies and the tricks they play as tenants and smaller mom and pops that you can deal with. So what a lot of big companies do, and Check Center did this, they have an operational company that runs the business, and they have a property company
that own the
that rent the properties.
Right.
So
the lease is on that
yes.
business.
So the lease. I mean, we bought the property at auction. I didn't put them in, but our tenant was Check Center Properties.
Yeah.
And Check Center Properties rented them out to the Check Center operational business. I mean, McDonald's, Subway do this as well.
Right.
Many do. The problem is that if the business folds, they can just put into liquidation the Check Center, the properties company.
Yeah.
And then you're stuffed.
And the money is really in the operations.
You got no recourse.
No.
So I'd bought this property from auction. we had something like 15 years on the lease,
Yeah.
and these people basically packed up, and we got just these template letters from a big accountancy firm saying it's gone into liquidation, you're in the list of creditors, but you get 2p or something like that. So this legislation meant that these payday loan companies shut down, and within a month they shut down their shops,
Operations.
and
Yeah.
we got that handed back. This shop was massive. They just wanted the location because it was close to the job center,
Yeah.
but they used the front bit of it. But about 2/3 of the shop at the back they didn't use. It was just wasted.
Right.
So at the same time as the gambling and payday loan shop legislation, they introduced PD,
Right.
which said you can take a back of a shop and convert it to residential.
Yeah.
So I thought, hang on a minute, that's interesting. So we've got this shop back. There's tons of space in it. Check centre, we're only using the front bit of it. We've got all this space at the back. We've now got PD that we can convert it. Anyway, but to cut a long story short, bunged 3 flats in the back.
3.
3 flats.
So it must have been a very wide fronted, deep shop
It was a
then.
deep shop, and there was a Mews Road
Right.
at the rear. So we got the street and numbering on the Mews Road,
Yeah. That's what I did with my one, with Surbiton.
exactly.
You got the numbering from the other side.
which is an interesting trick, because on their main road side, they unfortunately had selective licensing, so that every property had to be licensed.
Yeah.
But on the Mews Road, there wasn't. So if you just
Not only
you
did
don't
you
move the
build...
property, you just move the front door and the address, and
Yes.
you're completely out of it.
Amazing.
But,
And you just own the ground, or did you own the uppers as well?
we'd bought the upper. Well, this one was it was freehold,
Yeah.
but the flats had been sold off on long leases.
Right.
But it was mainly about the shops.
Shops, yeah.
But interestingly enough, we'd done 3 flats at the back.
Yeah.
The commercial space at the back was worth less,
Yeah.
because as a commercial space, it just didn't. The flow of the shop didn't work.
No.
No shop could make use of it. It's just giant storage.
Yeah.
So when we actually made those 3 flats, we chopped the shop back to less than a third of what it was,
Yeah.
but rented it out to a firm of solicitors is in there now, but they paid the same rent that
As-
Check Centre did for
As a whole unit.
the whole unit.
How did you
That's
get
the interesting thing about
Yeah.
commercial.
Amazing, because it was all Zone A.
Yeah.
But
That's
also,
where the value was.
exactly. So now the other thing was, how did you actually get away from the whole window thing? Because generally shops which are quite deep tend to not have very window.
Yeah. Well, this is just buying the right thing. It had a side passage,
Right.
external side passageway with windows all
knock-
down the side.
So you created new windows, or they
No,
were
I
already
didn't
there?
have to.
They were already
They were
there.
already there.
Yeah.
It had a courtyard, because it was actually the building was 2 shops next to each other.
Yeah.
So it had a courtyard at the back, and the flats that we created, they
Actually have the private courtyard as well.
we give them private courtyard, windows, everything, because it had that.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it was just so easy to do.
And the value, is immense, like outdoor space, and
Yes.
even I'm sure it's in a good high value area anyway.
Yes.
So it must have valued very high as well.
I mean, the other, trick with space. I mean, with that one, particularly in the back part, it was a storage place, but the ceiling height was nearly 4 meters.
Oh, wow.
So what that allows you to do, because we made large studio flats,
Yeah.
but it allows you to play around with bed decks and things. So you
Yeah.
put the kitchens underneath and
Yeah,
bathrooms
yeah.
under bathroom. No, we've got kitchens, bathroom spaces underneath, but you have a bed deck. So you really maximize
So like mezz-
floor plan. Yeah,
mezzanine.
exactly.
Oh, nice. So studio flats, and then did you have minimum space standards
Not
at the
then.
time?
Not then.
Lucky.
But they were all well, they were
Reasonable
They were about
sizes.
25 square meters.
Yeah, exactly. Not far off from what we are right now. I think it's about 30, isn't it?
37.
37
No,
now,
yeah.
yeah.
That
Right.
was before minimum space. But I think when these rules come in, you've got to make hay when the sun shines.
Yeah, first mover advantage, as you
Yeah,
call it.
yeah.
Right. So now you've got this just ground floor strategy where you just do the retail and you're maximizing everything from it, doing resi at the back, keeping it small. That's one strategy. Then you've got the commercial shops with the uppers.
Mm-hmm.
What are the different combinations in your view? I mean, I've done a few as well, and I know you've done loads. What are the different permutations and combinations of that sort of setup? You're buying the freehold, basically, of the
You're
home.
buying the freehold. Under permitted development, you can make a shop into two flats.
Yeah.
So what I like doing is buying double shops, because if you're buying,
But is that one shop or is that two shops next to each other? But that's rare,
well,
right?
no, it's not. Because sometimes that double shop has been, if you go down a high street, you'll see
You have
two
seen.
shops have been joined together.
To one, yeah.
And if you look at the street numbers, it will say, 44 to 46
Yeah.
High Street.
Yeah.
So it's got two street addresses. And you look up and you can see originally that was two buildings.
Yeah.
They've knocked the shop in two.
Yeah.
So if it was originally two buildings, then under PD, you've got two flats above 44 and two flats above 46.
Class G.
So you can do that Class G there. So that is an interesting thing to do.
And that Class G is still relevant, right? It's still
Of course.
valid,
Yeah,
still
yeah,
valid.
yeah. So that becomes very, very powerful. But the other thing is, I think the biggest problem or myth or misunderstanding people have about this is what the existing use is. So when you've got shops and uppers, the uppers have to have been used in connection with the ground floor.
Yeah.
So storage, office space, or it may have been residential accommodation for the shopkeeper,
Yeah.
but internally linked
Yeah.
with a staircase.
Ancillary, you call it, right?
Yeah. What people often come and say to me is, "Oh, I've got this thingy. So there's this shop, and there's already a large duplex or triplex flat above.
Yes.
Very large.
Yes.
And they say, I can split that, can't I? No, you can't, because it's a separate flat.
Yeah.
There's no link between the flat and the shop.
Right.
It's
if
already-
it's not ancillary, the Class G doesn't apply.
No.
But Class MA would.
No, because it's not an office. It's residential. It's
Yeah.
already residential. There's no residential conversion. But those make good HMOs.
That's what I was going to say. You would do those into a PD HMO up to 6
yes,
rooms.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then you could get double commercial valuation.
Yes, of course, because the yield works out very, very well on those. So I did a few of those, but I also like to do the make larger flats and do 4 lettable rooms in each flat.
Right. Okay.
So if you've got a
minimal.
like a minimum,
Yeah.
like I think one of the largest that I did was it's 3 shops on the ground floor
Yeah.
with 2 flats above,
Above
each
each.
shop,
6.
and each flat with 4 rooms.
Oh, wow.
But
So
you-
really
you-
big.
You haven't got the issues of having a massive HMO.
Yes.
Because each planning unit is only a 4-room
4
flat.
room, yeah.
It just happens to they're all stacked on top
And
of
people
each
love
other.
that anyway. When you get tenants and they don't like 7, 8, 10 bed HMOs because that's all this number of people that you
Yes.
have to try and
Yes.
mingle with and become friends with, hypothetically, right?
Exactly. And I think the other thing that the thing I quickly discovered is that all the rooms, studio rooms or rooms, HMO rooms that we do that are above commercial,
Yeah.
in good commercial areas, the voids are less, and the tenants stay longer,
Yeah.
because all their stuff that they need to do is in the vicinity.
Yes.
So you need, if you think about it, if you're in a room, you need storage. Yeah, I don't need to store a bottle of wine
Yeah.
in my flat. I literally go out of my building. There's an off license just opposite.
Yeah.
There's a Tesco Express just up the road.
Yeah.
There's an M&S over there. I can get my microwave meal. Oh, the landlord's internet is not working today. Oh, there's a coffee shop down below. I
Yeah.
just go there and work on my laptop.
Yeah.
So it's like you don't need the same space.
But what I don't get, and this is such an amazing strategy, as you said, you liven up the high street, for you say. People are coming and living there.
Yes.
There's more, sort of footfall and everything, safer as well, less crime. Why doesn't this strategy, according to you, work up north? Because down south, you see some vacant units here and there on high streets, but very soon they get let and, all of that. But up north, apparently there's high streets, just dime a dozen vacancies. Why can't we do the same thing over there?
Yeah, I know. This used to happen. I mean, on my commercial property courses, typically on the first couple of weeks, people would go sourcing and all of that, and they'd come along and say, "I found this gold mine area. I can't believe in Dudley, every shop has vacant uppers. We
Yeah.
can go out and buy the whole street."
Yeah.
Get really, really excited.
Yeah.
The problem is that there are many areas where the cost of conversion is more than the
Then the
price of a flat. And the other thing is that building regulations have got more onerous.
absolutely.
We were chatting earlier about it's even since when I did my first one in 2005, they were tough then,
Yeah.
but they've got even more tougher 20 years later. Every
Fire
year.
regulation,
Every year.
sound. I mean, the amount of insulation as well you need to put into the walls is
Yes.
becoming more and more.
But my argument is, well, look, I get you in the 1980s, building regulations weren't great for flats. There are lots of dodgy things done. But when have you ever heard of a building constructed in 2005, have a building safety issue like collapse or fire or something like
Yeah.
that in 2000? But we've added exponentially to the building regulations.
Yes.
And the more you add, the more building materials you need,
Yeah.
the more complexity it is to construct, and the more costly it is to construct. So therefore, the viability of many areas, it just doesn't work.
How about the HMO upstairs? That could possibly work if you do the minimos or you do, let's say, so for the existing residential above, there's a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom flat over 2 floors or whatever, then the HMO model could work, couldn't it?
If the flat already exists,
Then
yeah, then it is
cash
yeah.
flowing and yield.
Yes.
Yeah.
If the flat already exists, then and it's not too much to sort of convert
Yeah.
and all of that. I don't do supported living and that kind of stuff, but I know a lot of those providers don't tend to like
H-
above commercial.
yeah. It's not convenient,
yeah.
especially because people with learning difficulties and all of that. So
But then you have the situation then in the hellhole areas up north and all of that. Who's going to live? Who's going to be your tenant?
yeah.
You,
Especially now with the renters' rights bill coming in.
well, it is really you're dealing with you have to be comfortable with dealing with those sort of tenants.
Right. So shops and uppers, shops at the back of shop at the back strategy as well. Does it primarily work in the south and the southeast then?
Well, conversion, of course, works where the property values make sense.
Yeah.
So what I tend to say is, what's the average house price when you've got when you're in an area where you are at or above the average house price, then it's okay.
Yeah.
Then you'll find, as a rule of thumb, the cost of conversion will be worthwhile. But with retail, letting out retail, it's not just everywhere in the south. I mean, there's some northern towns that are actually very good. It's very, very selective. And what I tend to look for is with retail, what I look for is this. I look for the catchment area where it is. So what I look for is what are the houses in the immediate vicinity of that shopping parade? And what I'm looking for is a area where the average house price is at or above national average, as a rough rule of thumb.
What would you say would be the national average? About 400,
Something like that.
400, 450
Yeah.
pounds per square foot.
So if you're at or above national average, that's one tick.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I look for is a finite amount of high street, because there's a lot of places where it has a beginning, it has an end, and that's it. So if you want to be in that catchment area, that's the only place you could be.
Yeah.
If you think about High Wycombe, for example,
Yeah.
High Wycombe built a big shopping centre.
Yeah.
And there's no high street. There's just streets and streets where there's shops.
Yeah.
So there's too many shops. There's overcapacity. So there's always many things available to let.
Yeah.
Hemel Hempstead, there's streets and streets of shops, and that has the affluence problem as well,
Yes.
which keeps the interest
Price
low.
and the price per square foot is less.
Luton, loads of empty shops, average house price low. St Albans, for example. Very few vacancies. Average house price is high. The high street is not as sprawling as some some
of the other
areas.
towns and cities. Yeah.
So what I've tended to quite like is suburban towns where you've got a high street that has a beginning and an end. There are probably only 50, 60 units on that parade. So if you want to be there, there is always a lot of
Premium,
competition.
and there's a premium to pay for it as well.
So we're letting something out at the moment, and we do get offers, multiple offers, and it's up to us to consider which one we want to
Yeah,
take.
you've got a choice.
And that's the best position to be in.
And isn't the beauty of commercial also the fact that there's no commercial tenants' rights bill and all of that stuff?
I think that's excellent, and I think yes, because commercial property is let out under a 1954 Act.
Yeah.
Now we can safely say that our current government couldn't give two hoots about business or small businesses.
Well, we know they don't give.
They
two
don't
hoots,
give
right?
two hoots. So there is going to be no reform of commercial renting legislation. It's a business-to-business contract. It's not someone's home.
Yeah.
The landlord is very much in control. If they don't pay, you can pretty much go in and forfeit the lease.
Yeah.
So the landlord has a lot of power.
Rights.
Um,
And we have rights.
yeah, we have rights. Landlords have rights.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's fun to be a landlord again.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would you say what you've done in the last sort of 3 to 4 years in the commercial space that's been exciting? What's been your sort of favorite commercial project, I'd say? Or one of?
Well, sometimes small ones kind of excite me. I mean, it's like this. I was telling you about this one in Rickmansworth where it had.
What is it? Is a freehold?
It's a shop and uppers.
Yeah.
And the shop was let to an estate agent, and they were paying 11.5 grand a year. And the shop next door, which was pretty much identical, let to a dog grooming place for 23. And you kind of think, well, why? And how can you make this shop more like that one?
Yeah.
And the reason why that one was letting for so less, because it had a very narrow frontage. The access to the upper parts was through the front.
Right.
And it had the widest possible staircase you can imagine to access the upper parts, 1.5 meters wide and all of that. So we just shoved it all at the back. There's another goldmine that happens in commercial property, which is the increased space that you get when you start to strip back to brick.
The net versus gross internal area, right?
No, the thing is that here's what happens with commercial property, right? You come in and you take a lease for 10 years. You're not going to strip it back to brick. You want to, if I'm a tenant, I want to get going and get trading.
Yeah.
So what you tend to do is batten it all out, put new plasterboarding out, batten out the ceilings and all of that.
Yeah.
So the next tenant comes and does the same. So if you think about it, over 30 years,
the ceiling,
you get build up on the walls, you get build up on the ceiling, you strip it back to brick.
You get all that extra beautiful space.
What we found with that one, not only did we have 1.5 meters of, because you could see from the outside of the shop, why is the one we bought so narrow,
yeah,
and the one next door is wider,
yeah,
but it's the same building.
right.
So it was not just the staircase, but on the other side, what they had is a chimney breast. And what they'd done is they'd battened out along the chimney breast, so you wasted the space either side.
Yeah.
But if you then basically take that out and take out the chimney
Back
breast,
to brick or whatever,
and you take out the chimney breast, you've suddenly got the same zone A as the shop next door.
and double your rent.
So for relatively little work, you've suddenly massively impacted the value, because by taking that rent to the same as the shop next door, because of the way commercial property is valued, you massively increase the value of the thing.
Double the value, really.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you got the permitted development.
What was the uppers when you bought it?
The uppers was it was meant to be offices.
Yeah.
It was all ancillary.
Yeah.
It was
Although they had this external staircase as well.
No, the staircase was internal, but at the front.
But the space it was consuming from the
Yeah,
shops.
yeah. So we just made it from the rear, and we
Yeah.
relocated it. But the other thing that one had is that, which is very common with commercial properties, is if you had just seen the estate agent details
Yeah.
sheet, you would have said, can't do much with the first floor, natural light, this and that.
But you'd have windows to the front at the back.
You had windows to the front and the back, but it was a very long shop.
Right.
So you
In the
had
middle.
the middle problem. You had a massive problem in the middle. So the floor plan didn't show anything on the side. But this is why you have to go and visit the property. Because on visiting the property, you see that the windows there, but they're blocked up.
Yeah. Oh, they blocked it up as well.
Because people block them up for security. Banks do that all the time, don't
Stores,
they?
yeah, commercial.
You know, windows for commercial properties might not be great.
So you found windows which you didn't think
Yeah.
existed.
But because windows for a commercial property at the rear, which is used for storage, is not a great idea for security.
Yeah.
So often they're there, but they're blocked up.
Yeah.
So when the estate agent comes around and does their floor plan, draw it up. This is what it is. They're great.
Yeah.
But you go around and you physically see, I can open this up. Simple matter of opening it up. There you got the windows, you got the natural light, you've got the PD.
Yeah.
Job done.
And you did how many flats above?
Just Class G, two-bedroom flats.
Amazing. And Class G is deemed consent as well, or
Yeah.
56 days?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also the other thing that you mentioned about the space, not only what you just mentioned, but also the gross versus net, right? When the
Yeah.
commercial agents draw up the plan,
They don't really
they
do
don't
that.
do the toilets, the hallways, any common areas.
no.
And you find suddenly you got 10, 20% extra space.
Yes. And these are just, these are relatively little projects.
They add up. They do add up.
But I think that what it is they need a bit of creativity
Yeah.
to unlock the value. The value's there. It's how do you unlock it? So for people starting out or looking at property, it is about unlocking value.
Yeah.
You know, you can be very lucky and buy cheap.
Yeah.
You can add some value here and there, but generally, you know, we've had Homes Under the Hammer on TV for 20 years or so. Everyone knows what you could do with a residential
Resi.
property to tile it up.
And the
But
commercial.
commercial is a little bit more creative. It's about understanding how things are valued and how you can take, if you can turn, you've got an empty piece of space. What is the best way to get cash flow from it and the maximum cash flow possible? Whatever that is will mean that you'll get a higher value.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that value is determined by you. There's no ceiling to it, you see.
Yeah.
If I've got a 2-bedroom flat and it's in Luton, I can put in the jacuzzis, I can put in fancy smart home automation systems, but there's a ceiling for that 2-bedroom flat in that street, in that building.
Comparables.
Yes, it's comparables, it's bricks and mortar. But if I've got a good tenant paying and it's cash flow generating, it changes the game completely.
Well, actually, that was another question that's leading on to it. Let's say you've got this Rickman workshop. That tenant is paying 23 and a half. You actually find a tenant who desperately needs this. It could be a corner shop. It could be the location. It could be anything, right? They want to be on that particular high street or a chain that's fastly expanding and, you know, they're doing really well, blah, blah, blah. Do you think they might offer you more than market rent even? Like, it could offer you 25, 28.
So sometimes that happens.
Yeah, that's something.
We had a I won't say where this is because that
You'll give it
wouldn't
away.
be very good. But we I bought a shop where I thought that's a bit strange. This town, there's only one branded coffee shop here.
Right.
All the other towns nearby have everyone, the Neros, the Starbucks, everybody. But this town just had one branded coffee shop. And when you look at coffee shops' requirements, they want 1,200 square foot.
Yeah.
So we got this shop. It was only 700 square foot, but there was a PD that allows you to extend a shop as long as it stays commercial. You can extend a shop if
At
it
the back.
stays a shop.
Right.
So
So actually create more space.
Yeah. So we did a ground floor extension there to make
Under PD.
PD to give you a 1,200 square foot space,
yeah.
which is exactly what coffee
Coffee
shops
shop.
want. We actually got an offer within a week from Cafe Nero.
Oh,
Someone outbid them.
Oh.
Outbid them quite significantly.
so you didn't even take the Cafe Nero?
No, because what happened was the guy that owned the only branded coffee shop in the town basically offered a high, because it was right opposite his branded coffee shop. Um, so he paid more
And what did he do?
because he didn't want another branded coffee shop in the village.
So he bought.
Well, he's a interesting entrepreneur. So he has a chain of a certain brand of coffee shops. He also has, because a lot of these franchisees are into franchise businesses. So he's got a few KFCs. He's got some Domino pizzas. He's got some Baskin Robbins. He's just into that sort of
Franchising
concept.
model, yeah.
So he just put another one of his franchisees
yeah.
for a different non-coffee shop. He wanted to be, because I later found out that his branded coffee shop was doing £17,000 a week.
A week.
So it was worth him paying a few grand more to rent my shop directly opposite to stop someone else coming
It
in.
would halve his revenue.
So sometimes in areas where there's a bit of demand, you will get. Now I'm not. That's not a strategy you can cut and paste and do. That was just a bit of
a one-off. But I'm saying it could happen.
But it does happen.
It does
sometimes.
happen. Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about retail, and I think there's plenty of opportunities still going forward. I think. Would you think in those areas we talked about higher than
Yes,
average price per square foot?
interesting. I was at an event a few days ago, and someone was presenting on research analyst was presenting on the commercial landscape, and it seems that in the last couple of years, retail demand is seeing improvement.
Yeah.
Quite strong improvement for right-sized shops and location
On the primary high streets, you said?
primary and secondary.
And secondary.
Because secondary is getting a lot more sort of businesses that people need to go to.
Yeah.
Like coffee shops and cafes and
Barbers,
all
all
that
of
sort of
that,
stuff,
yeah.
barbers. But the thing that's tanking pretty much everywhere outside London is office space.
But do you mean non-grade A, right? Because grade A is still in demand.
Well, grade A, yes, in London, but even that is hard, because the tenants are getting. There was one in prime Canary Wharf area where one of the big banks only agreed to a lease renewal with the landlord if they put up the money to refit it, and it had only been refitted 15 years ago.
Right.
So, and that was millions. That ran into millions there to put up.
Tall skyscraper.
So that was kind of unusual, but it's a significant trend. You see, outside of London, office market is tanking.
Yeah.
Price per square foot is going down, down, down.
Yeah.
Residential per square foot is not. So if you can figure out a way to convert those to residential, you're laughing.
You know what I'm finding, because I'm doing a lot of these analysis. I'm looking at deals. We're looking at smaller, even smaller offices building into HMOs. Because that's a very popular strategy now, is taking smaller commercials into HMOs. And we're finding even in those areas where it's like 400, 450 pounds per square foot, the cost of conversion is around 250, including, I'm talking about, utilities and contingencies and whatever else you need to go with. It's just very, very tough to stack.
You're right, and that's when you have to start looking at, because you talked about the cost of conversion. I think with ground up development, the cost of getting to DPC level, the foundation, varies depending on the land you're on.
And the type of foundation.
Exactly, but once you got to DPC, the cost is fully predictable. With, say, office to resi conversion, it depends on what you're working with.
Yeah.
So if you're working with some old building that needs tons of building repairs, perhaps it's got wooden floors, perhaps it's got bad windows and all of that.
The bigger costs, right?
Yeah, or the 60s single glazed facades and all of that. So that will add significantly to your cost. So, the project we're doing at the moment is 17 one-bedroom flats in St Albans.
Oh, brilliant.
So it's a 1980s building.
Yeah.
It's brick. The windows are already double glazed.
Cavity wall and all of that.
Yes, it's got cavity wall. The windows are already double glazed, and it's also got concrete floors. Yeah. That, of course, means that the work you have to do for sound and fire is slightly less. Yes. So you're working with the building.
Yes.
If you're taking particularly a Victorian building, 1930s building, 1950s building, you've then got to do a lot of knocking out. It might be an office building, but you've got lots of load-bearing walls to knock out, chimney breasts.
Steels that you would need
exactly,
as well.
Roofs and stuff like that. The great thing with 80s and later is that, it's all internal partitions. You've got clear open floor plate. So the cost per square foot is lower.
Yeah.
Because it's less
And that's
complex.
80s and 90s.
80s and 90s, yeah, pretty
Yeah.
much.
So with this St. Albans one, which sounds like an exciting project, is it like a full PD class MA?
That was full PD class MA. Again, what we've done with that is a 4-story building. So it's a case of what I said at the very beginning, near the beginning, which is what gives you the maximum value per square foot.
Yeah.
So with the ground floor, we've got a tenant in there who's a private GP practice.
Right.
So it doesn't make sense to do that as residential.
Yeah.
Because
And you're getting some income coming in while you're doing all the works.
you've got income coming in while you're doing all the works. It's one tenant for the entire floor. We'd convert that to 6 flats. So the question is it better to have one income
Yeah.
paid quarterly in advance than manage 6 tenancies,
Residential tenants.
residential tenancies, and because it's on the ground floor of a busy street,
Yeah.
it's not as attractive as first floor and above. So it works out better for the project to leave the ground floor commercial and just do the upper floors.
So how's that project going? What is the combination of 1 and 2 bed flats in there then?
All once.
Oh, nice.
We've just done strip out.
Yeah.
So got a strip out contractor in doing all of that. The beauty of permitted development, and this is why I feel that everyone should go out and grab these opportunities while they can. The beauty of PD under current rules is that the developer is free to build the dwelling mix that they want. So our end game is rentals, not sales.
Oh, is that what? So you're going to keep
Yes.
it?
So if we build 17 one-bedroom, 37 square meter flats, pretty much, then that will be the best outcome for that. If we had to do this under planning permission, the council would say, well, we need a couple of 3 beds, we need a couple of 2 beds, we need a couple of 1 beds, and all of this sort of stuff. And that the 3 bed will not, I'll tell you, in any area, the 3 bed will not give you the same sort of yield per
Yield.
square foot as doing all ones.
No, absolutely.
So we have the freedom to do that. And these folks in government, they will change PD when they get
Do you
down
think?
to it.
You
Oh,
think?
they'll change it. Yeah. They'll put their own. They've already, in their manifesto, they called it the urban passport. They'll change the name. But the thing that they will do is their whole housing policy is around social housing delivery. So the ability, in my view, our ability to make 17 one-bedroom flats won't be there. You will be told that you will have to provide some larger units.
Yeah.
Because for social housing, they want to stick their benefit families in and all of that. So they need larger units.
Yeah.
And there will also be some contribution, social housing contribution. Like if you build nine or more flats for under planning
But
permission,
do you
had
think this
106.
is your own view, or have you read this somewhere, or you?
I haven't
kind
read
of
it anyway. It's just how they work. You just have to look at this government and see what they do.
I mean, they are bankrupt and they are finding ways to take money from the landlords and businesses.
Yeah, but if you look at their housing policy, it's all geared around social housing.
Yeah, of course, because they've got a massive queue of people waiting
Yes.
to get houses.
The current PD doesn't really favour social housing
yeah.
because it lets the developer do what they want. So my view is that in the centre of St Albans, we'll have a block which is 17 one-bedroom apartments with a good cash-flowing ground floor commercial tenant in one building. And I don't think anyone will be able to recreate that in a few years' time.
Well,
Under whatever rule
let's
that
come back and do another session.
under planning permission, you can't no one will let you build 17
Oh, no,
one-bedroom
absolutely.
flats.
But I'm saying if
And
they
as
take.
soon as they change this PD,
Well, let's not try and maybe.
they're busy with renters' rights.
They're
but
busy
that's
with
next
renters'
for,
rights.
That's
yeah.
busy. That's next for Angela Rayner.
So I know renters' rights is huge. Don't get me wrong, but when you look at some of the things in renters' rights, like periodic tenancies, and I think my biggest concern from all of those other bits and the fluff around it is the fact that landlords would have to potentially wait up to 1 year if they're in rent arrears to actually get somebody out. That is my biggest worry.
Yes, it is.
apart from everything else, like ombudsman and decent home standards, we're great landlords. I think I would like to think that
Mm.
we don't have properties where there's mold growing, and if there is mold growing, then we'll fix it. We've got timelines, we've got teams. But I think I'm not. I don't think I'm sure you're not worried about it because we maintain our properties, right? We have a standard.
I think yes. I mean, of course they're well maintained, and I think it's not favouring the smaller landlords. I saw a bit of research last week that said just a few years ago the average landlord had under two properties.
Yeah,
Now that's creeping up to five. So that means that this ones and two guys have
are
gone
gone.
away. It's
They're
go big
gone.
or go home. You are right, but there are some things that are worrying, such as um, the rent review situation. If you want to increase the rent, um,
Tribunals.
they'll take it to tribunal because every rent increases will be taken to tribunal because the new rent increase doesn't take into effect from the tribunal date. So you might as well string it out. Um, uh,
But I think there is something which I think you may have not even heard, but it came in like a couple of days ago that they're trying to introduce a clause because in the House of Lords that if, for example, it takes 6 months, like you just said, right, and the tenant is going to pay the new rent from the end of,
mm,
you can then as a landlord go back and say, well, I asked for the rent from 1st of October, let's put it that way. Therefore, the tenant would probably, so this is being
well,
currently,
it is, but I mean, no brainer Rayner will probably overturn it. I mean, she's done the dirty on the pets thing because when it went to the Lords, they said, okay, the landlord can insist on pet insurance and all of that. But now they're saying, well, if you have a tenant with a dog and they bite all the furniture, it's tough.
well, the thing
I
is,
mean, that's bounced back. I mean, I don't think we can comment too much on what's bouncing around between
because
lords
we
and
don't know
whatever.
what's going to be law
But
yet.
the thing with the tribunal is still there, and let's just contrast that with commercial property.
Yeah,
When you have a rent review, and some of our rent reviews, particularly when we're dealing with some of the big companies, they do go on a couple of years.
yeah,
But guess what? When the rent review decision is made, it's backdated to the increased amount is backdated to the time when it was meant to take effect,
yeah,
and that's payable within 14 days
yeah,
of the new
absolutely.
rent being agreed. So there's no benefit for procrastination,
No,
for delay,
absolutely.
and that should be the same principle with this.
No, I mean, look, I think we've been put in a situation, I think, in terms
Mm.
of as residential landlords, we're in a situation, and let's hope that this government doesn't come back at 4 years and some of it could be reversed. We don't know what's going to happen, but
Well, it's going to take a long time to
if you
turn
can
around.
ride this few years, I
Uh,
think.
I think there's an element of trying to look at what the build to rent guys are doing and the larger guys are doing and trying to replicate that. So, and I think that sort of thing will happen. For example, in larger blocks, if you're on the third floor in apartment 15 or whatever, and you want internet, you're not going to be calling up Virgin and they're going to bring cables from the street like you would do in a house. You would have that provided in that building, and it's normal that that's provided by
Developer.
the developer. You know, so you've got these value-added services which people have to pay for, which are separate from the tenancy agreement. It's quite common, for example, to give like we're going to rent our car parking spaces separately.
Right.
So there'll be a license for
A
the car park,
premium
which
for
is which
that.
is outside of the. So yes, you may have to rent um, the apartment to the person, but you're not at liberty to provide some of the other services.
Yes. No, I think, look, I
And
mean, there's no,
that's what will happen with the big renters, with the big build to renters, I feel.
no, absolutely. I think we know, as I said, but going back to the same concept, commercial is honestly the way to go. But what would you say is probably your biggest regret till today in property? Like you've been investing for the 30 years or so, and hopefully you've got loads more years ahead of you investing. What's your kind of biggest regret, or the deal that got away, or
Um, I think it's never quite know. You never really know when how good it is at the time sometimes because there have been so many times where you're thinking, you realize with hindsight that that was a damn good time. I wish
Yeah.
I'd done a lot more.
Yeah.
I think it's dangerous to
Presume.
presume, but it's also dangerous to be easily bored.
Yeah.
It's dangerous to want variety.
Yeah.
Sometimes, if the going's good, don't just do something else for the challenge or whatever.
Yeah.
Milk
What's
the cookie cut
yeah, like the
and
permitted
fully
development. Yeah.
exploit, what you've got to work. Because to assume that you'll be able to do that 5 years from now is
Yeah,
wrong.
is wrong. And we've seen that over a period of time, right?
Yes,
What you had back then changed,
yes.
and it's
Always
becoming a
changes.
narrower and narrower
Yeah,
opportunity in the market space. And
yes.
commercial is still great, but who's to know what's 5 years from next?
I think commercial is, as I said, great. I think there are tremendous opportunity with offices because the people do not understand how much the office market is going to contract.
Yeah.
It's not just the post-COVID. I think the problem is if the job market's contracting, the job market's going to contract even more thanks to AI. If you think about it, I mean, I employ people, and and I'm saying because we used to be in there at St Albans office. They used to have
Yes.
staff in there. It's going to be a
Well,
flat
I've
now.
attended the mastermind course
Yes,
in there.
but what's the my attitude to employing people is, do you actually need to be here? Do you need to be present right here? Because if I've got to put you somewhere, then business rates, the energy, the lighting, the workers' rights that's coming in,
Na-
employers' NI,
oh,
it's not
yes.
worth the hassle. If you can do that role, I mean,
Virtually.
even when we do these videos or whatever, obviously, the great guys that are
With
with us
us.
here in the studio, they need to be here to make this work, but they don't need to edit it. That
Yes.
editing can be done anywhere.
Yeah.
Once you got a format guide, some clear instructions, and all of that. So you got people and big companies are small businesses are way behind picking up on this, but big companies are doing this at rapid pace. They're figuring out do people have to be in these high cost countries? Can they have those people outside?
Elsewhere.
And do they need people at all
Yeah.
with AI? So the office market is shrinking.
Shrinking. Yeah. So you think there's a huge opportunity still, and would you say southeast is probably the best
Um,
place to be for that?
go for the newer buildings, the concrete
Yeah.
floors, where the glazing
Open
got lots of
lands.
bricks, no load bearing walls. Building is structurally okay because then at least you've got lesser construction costs. Go where end values of flats and apartments are a little bit higher.
Yeah.
They're not in some up north place or whatever.
And would
I
you?
mean, you can. I mean, I do say this about up north, but up north you can make money from office to residential
Yes.
conversion by going big.
And
So a
also
four flat scheme won't work, but if you did 50 or 60 supported living,
economies of
there
scale,
are lots of economies of scale and there are lots of end users that will take the whole lot off you.
co-living schemes, build-to-rent
Exactly.
schemes, all of those, larger units.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm some kind. It's a bit of a toss in the coin here. Like, I think my St Albans building would be near impossible to find a supported living company that wants to take it
And
on
they wouldn't stack
because
probably.
it's too high value for
Yeah.
them. Whereas, so we'll get good tenants and managing it won't be that much of a problem. But if you went to a lower value area,
Yeah.
because if I need to house 50 people, why would I house them in St Albans when I can house them in Blackpool?
Yeah.
So you get some office building on the outskirts of Blackpool, which is 1980s or later, concrete floors, brick, all of this sort of stuff that I've talked about. You convert that into at least 25 flats. But what I would recommend you do is have the exit sorted before you start.
Yeah.
So you're already talking to those people that want that and want to take that whole building off you on a 7-year lease, and you're good to go.
Yeah. And you actually could be have freedom of location as well yourself. You don't have to be there fixing all
Yes.
these little things. You've got a
Yes.
full FRI lease and
And a lot of those are outside the renters' rights and all of that as well.
exactly. We've talked a lot about retail opportunity in office, and I think you're right. Make hay while the sun shines. We've still got this opportunity here. What about HMOs?
Mm.
Because sometimes I find it very hard to focus. I mean, I know you've got this laser focus on commercial, 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 and that's what I want to do going forward. But then I have this, niggling thing. Oh, this is HMO deal here, there, and then you said get stuck into another. How do you kind of do? What do you think of the HMO strategy as well right now?
I think HMOs are a great way to get started. I've got a lot of HMOs. The last HMO I did is 2013, though. I
A long
think
time ago.
long time ago, but it's bread and butter stuff because it's very easy to get into.
Yeah.
It's very easy to get funding for, and it produces decent cash flow. I think the problem is it's very management intensive. You've either got to find a fantastic managing agent, and there are few out there that are of that grade, or you've got to have your own team
Yes.
and manage that team, which can be a little bit of a ball ache to say the least.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that I'm a bit worried about HMOs is that yes, rents are increasing, but I think the costs that landlords bear to run the HMOs are increasing at a higher rate than the rents are. Now, fortunately, um, when I did these, I actually made each room
Self-contained?
not self-contained, but self-contained in terms of electric. So
Oh,
they
you
pay their
did?
own electric,
Oh, wow.
and
And that
done
was
away
back
with
then you did
gas.
it.
Yeah, yeah. Because
So
then
what was
they're
that?
responsible.
Three-phase power?
I got those in. Yeah, it was actually easier to do then.
Then.
Why I'm talking, it's very difficult to get three phase, and because this is where I'm not talking about sub meters. The
Oh,
tenants actually pay directly to EDF or NPower.
oh, well, they just split the bill?
No, no, no. They've got their own meter for their room. You could do that then.
It was
So,
easier.
so I haven't had to bear the brunt of electricity prices doubling or whatever,
Yeah.
because if you're in room two, you've got your own
Bill?
meter, and EDF are chasing you. It's nothing to do with me, Gov. But you can't put those in now.
Yeah.
With nowadays, you have to have a proper separate address
Yes.
for every meter that you have, which means you have to have, it's
And the
fairly
cost of it
separate
might be
flats.
prohibitive as well
Um,
now.
the cost, it was always a few grand to do, but it
Extra.
was worth it
Yeah.
because you don't have to manage the bills. I think the big problem that people will find over the next few years, because Ed Miliband ain't going to bring down energy.
EPC.
We got
Yeah.
the highest energy costs in the world, quite frankly. That's
Yeah.
why no one wants to
Run a business.
manufacture anything here. So that's going to continue because our market is just false electricity market that we've got is so silly. I mean, I know I'm going off a tangent, but I mean, if you've got I don't know, a gas-powered electric station, the unit of electricity that comes out of that, how come that's the same price as something that comes out of a nuclear power station and the same unit price that comes from solar? Solar's meant to be free.
Yeah.
But when it's all fed into the grid and in the false electricity market that we have, the unit cost per kilowatt is the same.
Oh,
So
I
it's
didn't re-
nonsense.
So you think the grid is taking from
No,
different
that's the way it works.
sources? Okay.
Our electricity market is screwed. So that's why people's bills are double what they are in France. So anyway, going back to HMOs, most HMOs are configured as an all-you-can-consume buffet from the tenant's point of view. You want to control the heat, open the window, let a bit of cold air in. That's what they do. So you are stuffed because your rents, I know we've got this supply demand issue and all of that, but times are hard and there's a maximum share of someone's wallet that rent can take up.
Yes.
And I don't think rents are increasing at the same rate as the costs are of running an HMO.
And you're right, because I'm finding that in my areas in HMOs and the rooms that were letting maybe, within a week or 10 days are now taking 3 or 4 weeks to rent at that sort of rent. So you may have to either drop the rent because, as you said, there's a ceiling and you're trying to push the ceiling because, costs are going up. But I mean, HMOs is probably a great beginner strategy. What else would you think apart from HMOs? How does a beginner get into commercial property?
I think you got to learn stuff.
Yeah.
It's really about spotting those gems, because what people have told me is that they learn stuff from me and they find opportunities on a walk in their own neighborhood, because previously you just walk by some unit and you don't really ask any questions. Why is it empty?
Yeah.
What's the story here? Is it for sale? Is it for rent? And sometimes, if something's for, like with that bakery example, if something's for rent for long term, then in that case there was the bakery on the hook for the rent, but the landlord didn't really sort of care. But sometimes there isn't a tenant, and the landlord is just paying the empty rates, and is quite worried.
Yeah.
And they may want to. They can't be, because commercial property, landlords tend to invest in commercial property all over the place. So I've often found that the landlord lives 300 miles away.
Yeah.
He's got no interest in coming and refurbing that place to make it better.
Yeah.
So they may be interested in selling it.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing you don't get with commercial property, with residential property, are these estate agent boards in residential, say for sale or to let. With commercial, you get all inquiries.
Yeah.
All inquiries means pick up the phone, pitch them with whatever.
Yeah.
And all our creative financing strategies were born in commercial land.
Right.
And they were taken and adapted for residential. So lease options, option agreements, delayed
Vendor
completions, all vendor
financing.
financing. It was all came out of commercial property. So when you see a board that says all inquiries, it means the vendor is open to suggestion.
It's not going to be offensive to suggest that, oh, we'll, buy this property technically.
Yeah.
You do a vendor
Yes.
finance, and then
Yes.
we refurbish it, develop it, and
Yes.
then when we refinance.
Exactly. Or the other classic is you see commercial boards are often V boards,
Yeah.
V-shaped boards on the side of the building. And one side will say for sale, and one side will say to let. You ring them up and say, what do you want to do? I want to do both.
Yeah.
I'll let it for 3 or 4 years, and I'll buy it at the end of that. How about that?
Yeah.
Let
to buy.
Exactly.
Let with
That's what I'm
option to
saying.
buy,
A lease
yeah.
option. Because if the board says, when do you get that on a residential property? They're
Yeah.
saying, pitch me with a lease option proposition.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll lease it from you for 3 years. I'll do some bits to it. I'll up the value. And then I'll buy it at the predetermined
3 years
price.
or whatever.
Yeah.
Once you're well into the lease,
Yeah.
and the business is
Because
flush.
often when you have a property that's for sale and to let, they've already got the price. They're wanting £500,000 for the building. And often they have pushed the boat out a little bit.
Yeah.
They know they're not going to get that. It's probably worth 460, but
Yeah.
so you're saying, you know what, I'll give you 500 grand, but in 3 years' time.
Yeah.
But for now, we'll lease it at this much.
So you do like a delay. You let it. You actually do a lease.
Yeah.
With an option lease. Lease option.
But that's the beauty of commercial, because it's not as though you are dealing with a residential vendor who hasn't got, they've lived in the property for 20 years, haven't got a clue what you're talking about. And some residential estate agent who used to sell double glazing is now working in an estate agency. He hasn't got a clue what you're talking about. But with commercial, your agents have often done real estate courses. They're RIC surveyors. They understand things. Commercial property owners, they don't live in them.
Yeah.
They're all business owners.
Businesses,
Either they've got their portfolio of businesses. A lot of business owners have commercial property as part of their portfolio anyway. So when you start talking like this, they get what you're talking
It's
about.
business talk rather than.
Yeah. So all you got to do is equip yourself with a whole bunch of tools, which are basically these sort of strategies, and then find out the lay of the land, find out the problem, the story behind a deal, and then say, well, does this need a spanner, a screwdriver, or a wrench, and then apply that.
Brilliant. Well, look, let's
That's
start
pretty much
wrapping
it.
up. Yeah, no, absolutely. So what does the future hold for you then? Where do you see yourself 3-5 years from now? Are you going to be buying more commercial property in the UK? You're diversifying? What's going on?
Well, all sorts, really. I mean, the UK still has interesting opportunities. We've got to get by this, current
Labour
sort of
government.
legislation and Labour government, which is going to be a bit unfriendly. But whatever the rules come in, I think the problem I have at the moment is it's a bit uncertain what rules are coming in. Once they do come in, the dust has settled, and you can figure out what the opportunities are. It's very difficult to actually say these are going to be the planning opportunities, the PD opportunities, the rental opportunities, until these rules are set.
Yeah, because you've got
So
the
that's the
planning
uncertainty.
infrastructure bill, you've got the grey belt opportunities. All of
Yeah.
those are still
Yeah.
being debated, right?
But here's the thing, you got, I don't know, 500-600 of these people in Parliament. God knows how many people in the House of Lords. It's a massive committee, two committees, House of Lords, Commons, bounce things around. Every piece of legislation is imperfect.
Yeah.
Every piece of legislation has compromises. Every piece of legislation has opportunities. So once the goddamn dust is settled, we'll be all the way through that. And I've never found legislation where there wasn't opportunity in there. It's just that this period right now, they're dilly-dallying. They've got to just get on
Get
with
over
it. Tell us what the rules are, and
and
then we'll
then
figure out the
assess
opportunities.
what the opportunities are.
Exactly.
And like you said, as residential landlords as well, we need to start preparing for the renters' rights bill. We know it's coming.
Yeah.
80% of what's coming, we know. The last 20%, like you
Yeah.
said, is
Yeah.
not sure. But systemize your business, get ready, don't bury your head in the sand.
Absolutely. It's go big or go home in
Oh.
terms of the residential rents. You've got to have systems in place and all the rest of it, and you've got to have a certain quantum of properties to make those systems worthwhile.
Yeah.
And I think commercial to residential conversion, particularly under the current rules, is a massive goldmine opportunity, because of what we talked about with the values of office rents and all with the values of office space right now.
Yeah.
That's tanking so much, and residential rents will remain where they are, and value should be okay. It's going to be an interesting time. I mean, I've always found opportunity in every single market. It's just hard to give. I think the hardest thing about right now is to give a firm prediction about the UK opportunity for next year.
Yeah, because like you said, we need to
Exactly.
draw that line in the sand,
Exactly.
and then we know better.
Exactly. Because normally, I think in my last 30 years, they only tinker with one thing at a time.
Yeah.
This is the whole drains up. The renters' rights is changing. The workers' rights is changing. The PD is changing. The planning is changing. So that's massive.
That's a massive change.
To all happen together with it, and we don't know how it's going to come out the other end.
Yeah.
So to really talk about too much about what's going to happen, but
I'll bring you back hopefully once the landscape
do
has
that.
been set. And
But the opportunities that are here now ain't going to be here in 2 years' time. That's the
Yeah.
other way of looking at it.
Absolutely.
So forget about, because like with the PD, when you get a PD permission, you've got 3 years to build it out.
Yeah.
And no one's going to take that away from you,
Yeah.
even if the rules change.
Absolutely. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time. It's been amazing. It's been interesting. You've actually revived another spark in me to go and look for these vacant commercial buildings, uppers, and all of that. But look, thank you so much for your time on this really hot day as well.
Yes.
And bearing with all of this. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks. Please support, like, and follow me if you want to be in touch with all the property news in 2025 and beyond. Thank you.